Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 36 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto. Today we are starting chapter 16, titled Praise of King Prithu by the Professional Reciters. Let us begin with our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasya Chadeshatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyas cha kripas sindubhya eva cha, Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, so, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 16, titled Praise of King Prithu by the Professional Reciters. And it's not a long section, it's relatively short. It's only 27 verses, but it's one of the, in a sense, one of the most unusual chapters, in that there's only one section. The whole thing is one section. Right, so from verse 1 to verse 27, well, you can just call it Praise of King Prithu by the Professional Reciters. I've called it the Professional Reciters offer their glorifications, because when I did this, I thought that, as usual, there were going to be a number of sections, 4, 5, 6 is normal, and so I'd give them different names. Anyway, okay. So just one section. The whole thing is just the praise of King Prithu by the professional reciters. Verse 1 to verse 27. And so what we're going to do, first of all, we're going to read the verses, and then we'll come back and do verses and purports. So verse 1, the great sage Maitreya continued, while King Prithu thus spoke, the humility of his nectarian speeches pleased the reciters very much. Then again they continued to praise the king highly, with exalted prayers, as they'd been instructed by the great sages. Verse 2, the reciters continued, Dear King, you're a direct incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, and by his causeless mercy, you have descended on this earth. Therefore, it is not possible for us to actually glorify your exalted activities. Although you've appeared through the body of King Vena, even great orators and speakers, like Lord Brahma and other demigods, cannot exactly describe the glorious activities of your lordship. Right, so, verse 3. Although we're unable to glorify you adequately, we nonetheless have a transcendental taste for glorifying your activities. We shall try to glorify you according to the instructions received from authoritative sages and scholars. Whatever we speak, however, is always inadequate and very insignificant. Dear King, because you are a direct incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all your activities are liberal and ever laudable. Verse 4, This king, Maharaj Prithu, is the best among those who are following religious principles. As such, he will engage everyone in the pursuit of religious principles and give those principles all protection. He will also be a great chastiser to the irreligious and atheistic. Verse 5, this king alone in his own body will be able in due course of time to maintain all living entities and keep them in a pleasant condition by manifesting himself as different demigods to perform various departmental activities. Thus he will maintain the upper planetary system by inducing the populace to perform Vedic sacrifices. In due course of time, he'll also maintain this earthly planet by discharging proper rainfall. Verse 6. This King Prithu will be as powerful as the sun god, and just as the sun god equally distributes his sunshine to everyone, King Prithu will distribute his mercy equally. Similarly, just as the sun god evaporates water for 8 months, and during the rainy season returns it profusely, this king will also exact taxes from the citizens and return these monies in times of need. 7. This King Prithu will be very, very kind to all citizens. Even though a poor person may trample over the king's head by violating the rules and regulations, the king, out of his causeless mercy, will be forgetful and forgiving. As a protector of the world, he will be as tolerant as the earth itself. Verse 8. When there's no rainfall and the citizens are in great danger due to the scarcity of water, this royal personality of Godhead will be able to supply rains exactly like the heavenly King Indra. Thus he'll very easily be able to protect the citizens from drought. Verse 9. This King Prithu Maharaj, by virtue of his affectionate glances and beautiful moon-like face, which is always smiling with great affection for the citizens, will enhance everyone's peaceful life. Verse 10. The recite is continued. No one will be able to understand the policies the king will follow. His activities will also be very confidential, and it will not be possible for anyone to know how he'll make every activity successful. His treasury will always remain unknown to everyone. He will be the reservoir of unlimited glories and good qualities, and his position will be maintained and covered just as Varuna, the deity of the seas, is covered all around by water. Verse 11. King Prithu was born of the dead body of King Vena, as fire is produced from Arani wood. Thus King Prithu will always remain just like fire, and his enemies will not be able to approach him. Indeed, he will be unbearable to his enemies, for although staying very near him, they'll never be able to approach him and will have to remain as if far away. No one will be able to overcome the strength of King Prithu. Verse 12. King Prithu will be able to see all the internal and external activities of every one of his citizens. Still no one will be able to know his system of espionage, and he himself will remain neutral regarding all matters of glorification or vilification paid to him. He will be exactly like air, the life force within the body, which is exhibited internally and externally, but is always neutral to all affairs. 13. Since this king will always remain on the path of piety, he will be neutral to both his son and the son of his enemy. If the son of his enemy is not punishable, he will not punish him. But if his own son is punishable, he will immediately punish him. Verse 14. Just as the sun god expands his shining rays up to the Arctic region without impedance, the influence of King Prithu will cover all tracts of land up to the Arctic region and will remain undisturbed as long as he lives. Verse 15. This king will please everyone by his practical activities, and all of his citizens will remain very satisfied. Because of this, the citizens will take great satisfaction in accepting him as their ruling king. Verse 16. The king will be firmly determined and always situated in truth. He will be a lover of the Brahminical culture and will render all service to old men and give shelter to all surrendered souls. Giving respect to all, he will always be merciful to the poor and innocent. Verse 17. The king will respect all women as if they were his own mother, and he will treat his own wife as the other half of his body. He will be just like an affectionate father to his citizens, and he will treat himself as the most obedient servant of the devotees who always preach the glories of the Lord. Verse 18. The king will consider all embodied living entities as dear as his own self, and he will always be increasing the pleasures of his friends. He will intimately associate with liberated persons, and he will be a chastising hand to all impious persons. Verse 19. This king is the master of the three worlds, and he's directly empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's without change, and he is an incarnation of the Supreme, known as a Shaktyavesh avatar. Being a liberated soul and completely learned, he sees all material varieties as meaningless because their basic principle is nescience. All right, verse 20. This king, being uniquely powerful and heroic, will have no competitor. He will travel around the globe on his victorious chariot, holding his invincible bow in his hand and appearing exactly like the sun, which rotates in its own orbit from the south. 21. When the king travels all over the world, other kings, as well as the demigods, will offer him all kinds of presentations. Their queens will also consider him the original king, who carries in his hands the emblems of club and disc, and will sing of his fame, for he will be as reputable as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This king, the protector of the citizens, is an extraordinary king and is equal to the Prajapati demigods. For the living facility of all citizens, he will milk the earth, which is like a cow. Not only that, but he will level the surface of the earth with the pointed ends of his bow, breaking all the hills, exactly as King Indra, the heavenly king, breaks mountains with his powerful thunderbolt. Verse 23. When the lion travels in the forest with its tail turned upward, all menial animals hide themselves. Similarly, when King Prithu will travel over his kingdom and vibrate the string of his bow, which is made of the horns of goats and bulls and is irresistible in battle, all demoniac rogues and thieves will hide themselves in all directions. Verse 24. At the source of the river Saraswati, the king will perform 100 sacrifices known as Ashvamedha. In the course of the last sacrifice, the heavenly king Indra will steal the sacrificial horse. Verse 25. This King Prithu will meet Sanat Kumar, one of the 4 Kumars, in the garden of his palace compound. The king will worship him with devotion and will be fortunate to receive instructions by which one can enjoy transcendental bliss. Verse 26, in this way, when the chivalrous activities of King Prithu come to be known to the people in general, King Prithu will always hear about himself and his uniquely powerful activities. So verse 27, no one will be able to disobey the orders of Prithu Maharaj. After conquering the world, he will completely eradicate the threefold miseries of the citizens. Then he'll be recognized all over the world. At that time, both the Suras and Asuras will undoubtedly glorify his magnanimous activities. All right, so let us start again as we do. The professional reciters offer their glorifications. Verse 1. The great sage Maitreya continued, while King Prithu thus spoke, the humility of his nectarian speeches pleased the reciters very much. Then again they continued to praise the king highly with exalted prayers, as they had been instructed by the great sages. So, first point Prabhupada makes is he refers to the word Muni Chodita, having been instructed by the sages. Although Prithu Maharaj was just enthroned just now, and not showing any godly powers yet, still the reciters, they understood what he was, because they had already heard from sages and Brahmins. So we have to understand the incarnations by the instructions of authorized people. Narottam Das Thakur says, Sadhu, Shastra and Guru. We have to test everything by these standards. Spiritual master is one who follows the instructions of predecessors, the sadhus. Bona fide spiritual master doesn't mention anything not from Shastra. The statements in Shastra by sadhu or guru cannot differ. Second paragraph, the reciters, like the Sutra and Magadha, they were confidentially aware of the incarnation of King Prithu. Although Prithu denied it, they still glorified him. And indeed, they were extremely happy that he was so humble in his dealings with the devotees. So the previous chapter, the 15th chapter, verse 21, it said he was smiling and was pleasant while speaking to the reciters. So we have to learn from the Lord or his incarnations how to become gentle and humble. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the king's behavior was very pleasing to the reciters, and consequently, the reciters continued their praise and even foretold the king's future activities, as they had been instructed by the sadhus and sages. Verse 2, the reciters continued, Dear King, you're a direct incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, and by his causeless mercy you've descended on this earth. Therefore, it is not possible for us to actually glorify your exalted activities. Although you've appeared through the body of King Vena, even great orators and speakers like Lord Brahma and other demigods cannot exactly describe the glorious activities of your lordship. So, okay, there's a purport here by Prabhupada. Prabhupada says, so the term Mayaya means by your causeless mercy. The Mayavadis say Maya means illusion or falseness, but it also means causeless mercy. there are two types of Maya. One is Yoga Maya, second is Mahamaya. Mahamaya is an expansion of Yoga Maya, and both of these Mayas are different expressions of the Lord's internal potencies. So Bhagavad Gita, of course, explains the Lord appears by his internal potencies. So we should reject the Mayavad explanation that the Lord appears in a body from material energy. The Lord and his incarnations are fully independent. They can appear anywhere, anytime, by virtue of the internal potency. So Prithu Maharaj, although born out of the so-called dead body of Vena, still he's an incarnation by his internal potency. Sometimes, of course, the Lord appears as a fish or a boar. So he's completely free and independent to appear anywhere, anytime, and just wherever he likes by his internal potency. And Nantashesha has been chanting his glories eternally already, and multiple at one time, and he cannot reach the end of the Lord's glories, of Maharaj Prithu's, of the Lord, although he's been describing him since time immemorial. So what to speak of demigods like Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma? The demigods can't find the language to glorify him adequately, what to speak of others. Therefore, reciters like the Sutta, etc., they felt inadequate to speak about King Prithu. Second paragraph, we become purified by glorifying the Lord with exalted verses. Although we can't offer suitable prayers, it's our duty to try for our purification. And we don't need to stop our glorification just because Brahma and Shiva can't continue. Rather, as Prahlad says, everyone should glorify the Lord according to his ability. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, if we're serious and sincere devotees, the Lord will give us the intelligence to offer prayers properly. Verse 3, although we're unable to glorify you adequately, we nonetheless have a transcendental taste for glorifying your activities. We shall try to glorify you according to the instructions received from authoritative sages and scholars. Whatever we speak, however, is always inadequate and very insignificant. Dear King, because you're a direct incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all your activities are liberal and ever laudable. However expert you are, you can't describe the glories of the Lord adequately, but still, try as far as you can. It will please the Lord. Lord Chaitanya advised his followers to preach everywhere. And the message is essentially Bhagavad Gita. Surrender to Krishna. Don't get entangled on the material level. So the preacher's duty is to study Bhagavad Gita in disciplic succession and from the great sages. And if one is going to speak in public, one should speak in accordance with Sadhu Shastra and Guru predecessors. This is the easiest way to glorify the Lord. So actually devotional service is the real method, for by doing this one can satisfy the Lord with just a few words. Without devotional service, many books cannot satisfy the Lord. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, even though preachers of the Krishna consciousness movement may be unable to describe the glories of the Lord, they can nonetheless go everywhere and request people to chant Hare Krishna. Verse 4, this king, Maharaj Prithu, is the best amongst those who are following religious principles. As such, He will engage everyone in the pursuit of religious principles and give those principles all protection. He will also be a great chastiser to the irreligious and atheistic. So Prabhupada comments that this is a very nice description of the duty of the king or the head of a government to see people as strictly following religious life, and should be strict in chastising the atheists. So an atheistic government should never be supported by a king or head of government. That is a good test of good government. Secular government means people are allowed to do all irreligious things that the government doesn't mind. Yeah, they don't care. Do what you like, basically. So people in such a situation can't be happy, despite if they have economic development. And Prabhupada explains that rogues, in the form of government people, rogues exact taxes from citizens for their own sense gratification. And in the future, people will still be so harassed that Srimad Bhagavatam says the people will flee their homes to the forest. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, however, in Kali Yuga, democratic government can be captured by Krishna-conscious people. If this can be done, the general populace can be made very happy. Verse 5. This king alone in his own body will be able in due course of time to maintain all living entities and keep them in a pleasant condition by manifesting himself as different demigods to perform various departmental activities. Thus he'll maintain the upper planetary system by inducing the people to perform Vedic sacrifices. In due course of time, he'll also maintain this earthly planet by discharging proper rainfall. So first, there's a purport, first paragraph. Demigods, of course, are assistants to the Lord. When he comes, they come with him. So therefore, an incarnation, one of his incarnations, can act for the demigods to keep the planetary systems in order. Then, of course, protection of the earth depends on proper rainfall. Otherwise, it will not be possible to live. And as Bhagavad Gita, etc. say, sacrifices done to please demigod, sacrifices are done to please the demigods in charge of rain. That's from Bhagavad Gita 3:14. So the second paragraph. So proper sacrifices are needed, and Prithu Maharaj would induce people to do such sacrifices, so there'd be no shortages. But in Kali Yuga, we have the so-called secular state, and the kings or heads of government are all fools and rascals. They're ignorant of the intricacies of nature's causes and principles of sacrifice. So these governments now, they make plans which always fail, Prabhupada says, and people therefore suffer. Generally, the heads of state don't suffer because they've got their mansion or palace and they want to hold on to it forever. So they make plans which always fail and people therefore suffer. So to counteract this, Shastra advises, chant Hare Krishna. Verse 6. Thus King Prithu will be as powerful as the sun god. And just as the sun god equally distributes his sunshine to everyone, King Prithu will distribute his mercy equally. Similarly, just as the sun god evaporates water for 8 months, and during the rainy season returns it profusely, this king will also exact taxes from the citizens and return their monies in times of need. So Prabhupada makes the point here that the process of taxation is described here nicely. It's not for the sense gratification of the government heads, so they can finance, a luxurious lifestyle. Tax revenue should be distributed to the citizens in times of need, in famine time or flood, and should never be distributed among the government servants in high salaries and allowances. So Kali Yuga in Kali Yuga, the citizen's position is terrible because taxes are exacted for so many things and then spent for the personal comforts of the administrators. Second paragraph of the purport. The example of the sun here is very nice, and it's a well-known example, that even though the sun is a long way from here, and although it never touches the earth, still it distributes clouds by taking water from the seeds and then pouring that water, the same water, back onto the earth in the rainy season. Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, as an ideal king, King Prithu would execute all this business in the village and state as expertly as the sun. Verse 7. This is the reciters continuing. This King Prithu will be very, very kind to all citizens, even though a poor person may trample over the king's head by violating the laws and regulations. The king, out of his causeless mercy, will be forgetful and forgiving. As a protector of the world, he will be as tolerant as the earth itself. Right. So Prithu here is compared to the earth planet regarding tolerance, because the thing is, the earth is always trampled on, but still it gives food grains, fruit, etc. So Prithu Maharaj would still be tolerant, even though some citizens would violate the rules of the state. He would still maintain them with grains, etc. So it's the duty of the king to look after the citizens, even at the cost of his own convenience. So, anyway, in Kali Yuga, the Kshatriyas enjoy life at the cost of the taxes from the citizens. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, eventually the state will not be able to collect taxes and consequently will not be able to meet its huge military and administrative expenses. Everything will collapse and there will be chaos and disturbance all over the state. Verse 8. When there's no rainfall and the citizens are in great danger due to the scarcity of water, this royal personality will be able to supply rains exactly like the heavenly king Indra. Thus he'll very easily be able to protect the citizens from drought. So let's have a look at the purport. Prabhupada's nicely compared. They've compared Prithu to the sun and to Indra. Indra in the sense that he's in charge of the waterworks, the water department, here on Earth and on other planets also. So it's indicated that Prithu would arrange for distribution of rainfall personally, if Indra failed to do so. So sometimes Indra becomes angry at the earthlings kings, that's us, if they didn't do sacrifice to him. But Prithu as the Lord is not dependent on Indra. He would counteract the lack of rain by his godly powers, just like Krishna did in the Govardhan Leela. Verse 9, this king, Prithu Maharaj, by virtue of his affectionate glances and beautiful moon-like face, which is always smiling with great affection for the citizens, will enhance everyone's peaceful life. Verse 10, the reciters continued, no one will be able to understand the policies the king will follow. His activities will also be very confidential, and it will not be possible for anyone to know how he will make every activity successful. His treasury will always remain unknown to everyone. He'll be the reservoir of unlimited glories and good qualities, and his position will be maintained and covered, just as Varuna, the deity of the seas, is covered all around by water. So let's have a look at the purport. There's a predominating deity for each material element. Like Varuna, who's also known as Pracheta, is the deity for the seas. It may seem that the sea is devoid of life, but if you go inside, if you know the sea, you know there's so much life there. And the king is Varuna. So just as no one knows what happens in the sea, no one would understand the policies of Prithu Maharaj to make everything successful. His diplomacy was very grave. And Prabhupada says his success was made possible because he was a reservoir of unlimited, glorified qualities. Right, so here the word Upagupta Vita is significant because it indicates that no one would know the extent of the confidential riches of Prithu Maharaj. The idea is that everyone, not only the king, should keep their money confidentially, so in due course it can be used for good purposes. In Kali Yuga, the king or the head of the government has no well-protected treasury and so has to use paper money. So in bad times, they just print more, which raises the prices of the goods. And in this way, the citizens' situations become more precarious. So keeping one's money secretly is an old practice, even in the time of Prithu Maharaj. And Prabhupada says, there's no fault in everyone keeping their financial situation a secret. Krishna. Okay. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the main point is that everyone should be trained in the system of Varnashram Dharma, so that the money is spent only for good causes and nothing else. Verse 11. King Prithu was born of the dead body of King Vena, as fire is produced from Arani wood. Thus King Prithu will always remain just like fire, and his enemies will not be able to approach him. Indeed, he'll be unbearable to his enemies, for although staying very near him, they'll never be able to approach him, but will have to remain as if far away. No one will be able to overcome the strength of King Prithu. So there's a very short purport here, 2 sentences. Let me just read it. Arani wood is a kind of fuel used to ignite fire by friction. At the time of performing sacrifices, one can ignite a fire from Arani wood. Although born of his dead father, King Prithu would still remain just like fire. Just as fire is not easily approached, King Prithu would be unapproachable by his enemies, even though they would appear to be very, very near him. Verse 12, King Prithu will be able to see all the internal and external activities of every one of his citizens. Still no one will be able to know his system of espionage, and he himself will remain neutral. regarding all matters of glorification or vilification paid to him. He'll be exactly like air, the life force within the body, which is exhibited internally and externally, but is always neutral to all affairs. There's no purport here. We go to verse 13. Since this king will always remain on the path of piety, he'll be neutral to both his son and the son of his enemy. If the son of his enemy is not punishable, he will not punish him. But if his own son is punishable, he will immediately punish him. So, similar situation, very short purport. I'll just read it. These are the characteristics of an impartial ruler. It is the duty of a ruler to punish the criminal and give protection to the innocent. King Prithu was so neutral that if his own son were punishable, he would not hesitate to punish him. On the other hand, if the son of his enemy were innocent, he would not engage in some intrigue in order to punish him. Verse 14. Just as the sun god expands his shining rays up to the Arctic region without impedance, the influence of King Prithu will cover all tracts of land up to the Arctic region and will remain undisturbed as long as he lives. So Prabhupada makes the point, the Arctic areas are not visible to ordinary people. I've never been there. I don't think any of you have. Well, I've been to Murmansk. It's in the Arctic Circle. But, it's a city you wouldn't really think you're in the Arctic Circle. Except at night, in summer, it's light all night. And in January, in midwinter, it's dark all day. Right. Okay. So the sun still shines in the Arctic without impediment. So just as no one can impede the sunshine from spreading throughout the universe, no one could check Prithu's influence and reign during his whole life. The conclusion is sunshine and sun god can't be separated, so Prithu and his ruling strength could not be separated. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, his rule over everyone would continue without disturbance. Thus the king could not be separated from his ruling power. 15. This king will please everyone by his practical activities, and all of his citizens will remain very satisfied. Because of this, the citizens will take great satisfaction in accepting him as their ruling king. 16. The king will be firmly determined and always situated in truth. He'll be a lover of the Brahminical culture and will render all service to old men, Haribol, and give shelter to all surrendered souls. So giving respect to all, he'll always be merciful to the poor and innocent. So we got a purport here. The word Vriddha Sevaka is significant. Vriddha means old men. There are two kinds of old men. One is old by age and the other is old by knowledge. So this word here, Vriddha Sevaka, means one can be older by advancement of knowledge. Prithu Maharaj was very respectful to the Brahmins. He protected them. Also, he protected the elderly. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, whatever the king would decide to do, no one would be able to stop. That is called Dridha Sankalpa or Dridhavrata. Verse 17, the king will respect all women as if they were his own mother, and he will treat his own wife as the other half of his body. He'll be just like an affectionate father to his citizens, and he'll treat himself as the most obedient servant of the devotees, who always preach the glories of the Lord. Right, let's have a look at the purport here. Prabhupada begins the purport by saying, a learned man treats all women except his wife as his mother. looks on others' property as garbage in the street and treats others as they would treat his own self. That's from Chanakya Pandit. Chanakya Pandit, who's not a devotee actually, but he's got all these sort of clever sayings about sort of more like how to live in the mode of goodness, or something like that. Live nicely in material life. So Prabhupada says this should be the standard for education, not just academic degrees. One has to execute what he's learned in life. And this would all manifest in Prithu Maharaj. Even though he was the king, he treated himself as a servant of the devotees. And by Vedic etiquette, if a devotee comes to a king's palace, the king would offer his own seat to the devotee. Here the word Brahmavadinam is significant because Brahmavadi refers to devotees. And so Krishna is the supreme Brahman, and that's confirmed in Bhagavad Gita chapter 10 verse 12. So when we say Brahmavadinam, it refers to the devotees. The star should always, the state should always serve the devotees and ideally conduct itself according to the devotees' instructions. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, because King Prithu followed this principle, he's highly praised. Verse 18, the king will consider all embodied living entities as dear as his own self, and he'll always be increasing the pleasures of his friends. He will ultimately associate with liberated persons, and he'll be a chastising hand to all impious persons. So when we look at the verse, the word for word, Dehinam refers to those who are embodied. And the living entities are embodied in 8,400,000 species, but Prithu treated them all the same. But now the kings or heads of government don't do that. Mostly they're meat eaters, and even if they aren't, they still allow cow slaughter. It's amazing, isn't it? Even Gandhi, he was vegetarian, but he said, well, the Muslims, it's their religion to kill cows, so that's all right, but it's not all right. Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, another significant word in this verse is muktasanga prasanga, which indicates that the king was always associating with liberated persons. Verse 19, the king is the master of the three worlds, and he's directly empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's without change, and he's an incarnation of the Supreme, known as Shatyavesha Avatar, being a liberated soul and completely learned. He sees all material varieties as meaningless because their basic principle is nescience. So Prabhupada makes the point that all of Prithu's qualities can be summed up in the words Sakshad Bhagavan. All of Indra's qualities are summed up in the word Sakshad Bhagavan. It means directly, the very one, the actual Bhagavan, original. It indicates he's directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so he has unlimited qualities. As an incarnation, he cannot be equaled in his good qualities. The Lord has the six opulences in full, and Prithu Maharaj displayed these in full. So there's a second paragraph here. The word kutastha is also significant. It means without change. There are two kinds of living entities, Nitya Mukta, Nitya Bada. Nitya Mukta never forgets his position as an expansion of the Supreme Nitya, the Lord. So he sees the material world with a different vision. The Nityabada is the eternally conditioned, who sees material varieties as being actually different from each other. So we should remember that the embodiment of the conditioned soul is like a dress. One may dress in different ways, put on different types of clothing, but a learned man doesn't take these things into consideration. So Bhagavad Gita chapter 5 verse 18 makes that very, very clear. So Prabhupada quotes actually Bhagavad Gita 5:18, translation. Well, Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmane Gavihastani Shuni Chaiva Swapake Cha Pandita Samadarshana. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmin, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater, an outcast. So therefore a learned man doesn't look on the dresses that externally cover the living entity, sees the pure soul within the dresses, and knows the dresses are the creation of nescience. As Shaktivesh avatar empowered by the Lord, Prithu didn't change his spiritual position. So there's no possibility he would view the material world as reality. Verse 20. This king, being uniquely powerful and heroic, will have no competitor. He'll travel around the globe on his victorious chariot, holding his invincible bow in his hand, and appearing exactly like the sun, which rotates in its own orbit from the south. So the word yatarka indicates the sun isn't fixed, but it rotates in its orbit, which is set by the Lord. This is confirmed by Bhagavatam Brahma Samhita. 5th Canto Bhagavatam says the sun rotates at 16,000 miles per second. Similarly, Brahma Samhita says the sun rotates in orbit by the order of the Lord. So the sun is not fixed in one place. And Prithu Maharaj, similarly, his ruling power would extend all over the world. So he'd cover the whole planet. Another important word is Naradeva. A qualified king is God in human form. And Veda culture says the king should be honored like the Lord because he represents the Lord and who gives all protection. He's therefore Nath, the proprietor. Even Sanatana Goswami respected Noah Hussain Shah as Naradeva, although he was a Muslim. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, a king or governmental head must therefore be so competent to rule over the state that the citizens will worship him as God in human form. That is the perfectional stage for the head of any government or state. So I'm going to go on. It'll take another 5 minutes to finish the chapter. When the king, so this is now, verse 21, when the king travels all over the world, other kings as well as the demigods will offer him all kinds of presentations. Their queens will also consider him the original king, who carries in his hands the emblems of club and disc, and they'll sing of his fame, for he will be as reputable as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, okay, in the purport, Prabhupada says Prithu's already known as an incarnation of the Lord, because these reciters are glorifying him like that. And they're calling him Adirajan, the original king. Actually, original king is Narayan, or Lord Vishnu. People don't know that the king is meant to be the protector of all living entities. And actually the Lord is maintaining all living entities, but the king Naradeva is his representative. So it's the king's duty to supervise the distribution of wealth for the maintenance of all living entities. And if he does that, he'll be as reputable as Narayan. Yes. Verse 22, this king, this protector of the citizens, is an extraordinary king and is equal to the Prajapati demigods. For the living facility of all citizens, he will milk the earth just like a cow. Not only that, but he'll level the surface of the earth with the pointed ends of his bow, breaking all the hills, exactly as King Indra, the heavenly king, breaks mountains with his powerful thunderbolt. There's no purport here. We go to verse 23. When the lion travels in the forest with its tail turned upward, all menial animals hide themselves. Similarly, when King Prithu will travel over his kingdom and vibrate the string of his bow, which is made of the horns of goats and bulls, and is irresistible in battle, all demoniac rogues and thieves will hide themselves in all directions. So Prabhupada makes the point, it's very nice, appropriate, to compare a king like Prithu to a lion. Even today in India, or historically, the Kshatriya kings, the name was Singh, or lion. So unless the rogues and thieves and other demons are afraid of the king, there can't be peace and prosperity. Yeah. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, thus it is most regrettable when a woman becomes the executive head instead of a lion-like king. In such a situation, the people are considered very unfortunate. Verse 24, at the source of the river Saraswati, this king will perform 100 sacrifices known as Ashvamedha. In the course of the last sacrifice, the heavenly King Indra will steal the sacrificial horse. Verse 25, this King Prithu will meet Sanat Kumar, one of the 4 Kumars, in the garden of his palace compound. The king will worship him with devotion and will be fortunate to receive instructions by which one can enjoy transcendental bliss. So Prabhupada makes the point that when someone's properly instructed by a spiritual master and understands transcendental bliss, then he enjoys life. Bhagavad Gita 18:54 talks of Brahma Bhuta. When you reach the Brahman platform, you neither hanker nor lament, but you take part in transcendental blissful enjoyment. So although Prithu is an incarnation, he nonetheless taught people to take instructions from a spiritual master. Verse 26. In this way, when the chivalrous activities of King Prithu come to be known to the people in general, King Prithu will always hear about himself and his uniquely powerful activities. I'll just read the short purport. To artificially advertise oneself and thus enjoy a so-called reputation is a kind of conceit. Prithu Maharaj was famous amongst the people because of his chivalrous activities. He didn't have to advertise himself artificially. One's factual reputation cannot be covered. And finally, or a little late, but anyway, verse 27, last verse, no one will be able to disobey the orders of Prithu Maharaj. After conquering the world, he will completely eradicate the threefold miseries of the citizens. That's amazing. Then he'll be recognized all over the world. At that time, both the Suras and the Asuras will undoubtedly glorify his magnanimous activities. So Prabhupada points out that at the time of Prithu Maharaj, the whole world was ruled by one emperor, although there were many subordinate states. Just as now there are many states, there was then, but there was a supreme emperor in those days. So as soon as there were some discrepancies in maintaining Varnashram, the emperor would take charge of the small states. So on we go to the second paragraph. The word Utpatita Lokashalya indicates that Prithu completely uprooted all the miseries of the citizens. Shalya means piercing thorns. There are many thorns which pierce the citizens, but competent rulers up to the time of Maharaj Yudhisthira, not really much after that, uprooted them all. Prabhupada says, it is stated that during the reign of Maharaj Yudhisthira, there did not even exist severe cold or scorching heat, nor did the citizens suffer from any kind of mental anxiety. This is the standard of good government. So, Prithu Maharaj also had such a standard, devoid of all anxiety for all. So the inhabitants of all the saintly and demoniac planets, they all glorified the activities of Prithu Maharaj. So therefore the people or countries who want to spread their influence worldwide should consider this. Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, if one is able to eradicate completely the threefold miseries of the citizens, he should aspire to rule the world. One should not aspire to rule for any political or diplomatic considerations. So we'll carry on tomorrow, devotees, with chapter 17. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.